Well, hey, everybody, welcome back to the City Light podcast. So glad that you're joining us today. If the content's been encouraging you, I know we've kind of been all over the map the last couple of weeks and months, but do us a favor, subscribe, leave us a review. We're really trying to create stuff and give you stuff to help you in your walk with God. But today, I'm fired up, Ross.
I'm fired up, too.
I'm fired up because we are joined by a pastor of pastors. Brandon Petty, everybody, is with us on the podcast today. Brandon pastors Generation Church in Portland, Tennessee. Mm-hmm. The Bishop of Portland, as I like to call him. But Brandon has an amazing just testimony and story. And I was telling you this last night. I think you really have a unique take and voice on things when it comes to like how do I follow Jesus well without losing my mind and ruining my life. And so I'm excited for our church and for our listeners to hear you today. I wish we could get you on a Sunday, dude.
Let's make it happen.
You're too busy, man.
Bro, I will make myself unbusy.
Well, dude, thanks for being with us today. Yeah. I'm really excited.
Absolutely.
Give us the lay of the land. I know we could probably spend an hour and a half just on your story into ministry alone, but man, just kind of give us the highlights of who you are, how you got into ministry, and things like that.
Yeah, man. Wow. First of all, honored. Thank you so much for asking me to be a part of this. Let's see. Well, I didn't grow up in church. I'll just kind of start with, I've been married 22 years. Be 23 this next coming June. 3 amazing kids. I got a daughter who's a sophomore at Highlands College down in Birmingham, Alabama. And
Shout out Highlands.
Shout out Highlands. And then I have a daughter who's a sophomore in high school. She plays volleyball, and she's starting to play flag football, so that's pretty cool.
Really?
Yeah. So I'm pretty excited about that. And then I have a son who's 10. He's a 5th grader, so he'll be in middle school next year. But he plays all the things, and he keeps me on my toes. So I tell you, like, people are like, why do you go to the gym so much? So I can play with my son, because
that's great.
he keeps me on my toes, keeps me young. But man, just blessed, been blessed. I didn't grow up in church. I grew up, my mother had me when she was 16 years old. She got pregnant when she was 15. And she grew up in a ton of dysfunction. And of course, that's all she knew. And I always tell people, even when to kind of preface my story, I don't, my mother did the best she could with what she knew how to do, So we didn't really go to church. I think as a kid, I would remember like once in a blue moon going to some sort of Christmas service or something like that, or an Easter thing. But as far as like regular church attendance, we did not do that. But yeah, she had me when she was 16, and because she had so many father wounds and things like that, she really found all of her affirmation in men. And so I had at least 5 or 6 stepdads. I think my mother, by the time she was from 16 to 25, she was married 4 or 5 times, I believe. Wow. And so when I was a kid, I always saw my mom as older, but like I didn't realize, like, man, she's a kid.
Yeah,
trying to raise a kid, But yeah, grew up around a ton of dysfunction, addiction, lots of drugs, alcohol. My mother got married to a man when I was 8 years old who was a cocaine addict, and he was a drug dealer. And so I can remember sitting in the back seat of the vehicle while he did drug deals in East Nashville. Grew up in Middle Tennessee. It's funny, people always ask me, where are you from? And I just say Middle Tennessee, because I was moved around so much as a kid. I didn't really land in one spot longer than like 3 years. So the majority of my childhood, which when I say that means I spent like 4 years there, would have been Hendersonville, Tennessee. And so that's where I spent the longest part of my childhood and some of my middle school years. But I think I literally went to every school in Sumner County.
Did you really?
It was wild, man. I went to Gallatin schools, Hendersonville schools. I think I went to all the Hendersonville schools. I was at Beach. I was at Hawkins. I was different places. In high school, I went to 2 different high schools. One, I went to Murfreesboro, Oakland, my sophomore year, and then I ended up graduating from Westmoreland. And I'll kind of talk about how I got there. But So yeah, I grew up, and at age 8, my mother married a cocaine addict and drug dealer, and he was highly, severely abusive. So I was physically abused quite a bit from my stepfather. And during those years, from 8 to 11, I tell people those are like the vital years for young men especially. I think a lot of people think that shaping boys happens when they turn 13 or 14 or 15, but really it starts when you're 8 or 9. Wow. You start really developing a mindset about who you are. You start developing self-esteem. You start developing a sense of belonging as you make friends. So really those preteen years are some of the most important years in a young man's life. And then all I knew was abuse. I lived in fear constantly. I was a very I need to make sure that I walk that straight line, because I would get beat for the smallest things. It didn't matter. Every day I would get picked up from school. I remember being in first grade and him just being he would make up a reason. And while I was on the way home, he would taunt me, about something that he was going to beat me over. Jeez. And so that was a large part of my childhood. And but I'm trying to figure out how to I don't want to spend all day talking about this stuff, but I also want to maybe share whatever you think is important for our listeners.
Yeah. Just everything but stability.
Yeah, anything but stability growing up. Luckily, my mom got out of that situation after a few years. But she ended up meeting a man. I tell people all the time, it's pretty wild. But this guy was the first date they ever went on. He took me because about 5 or 6 years later, my mother gave birth to my brother, and he took us fishing on the first date. And this was the first time really a man had done anything with us, and kind of took us to do something together. And he was like the ultimate man's man. It was wild. He fished. He taught me how to fish. He taught me how to play basketball. He rode bulls. He was an artist. He was a rodeo guy. Just built. He was bodybuilder type dude. He really was like a unicorn of men. But the problem is he was an alcoholic. And so he wasn't an abusive drunk. He was just absent. And so when he would go on these bingers, he would disappear for weeks. We wouldn't know where he's at, wouldn't know if he's alive. And so it was he couldn't just casually drink. If he drank, he drank himself into just a stupor, to where it was he would just go on these bingers, and then he would randomly show back up, and he would try to go to AA. He would try to get help, and he would stay clean for a while, go back into it, whatever. And I think that was the longest my mother was married to. I think she was married to him for about 6 years, really from the time I was about 9 or 10 to 15. And man, he was the one guy in my life that I really called dad, and because I didn't know my real father growing up until I turned 15, which all of that ties into the story. I'm telling you, I could tell you parts of my story that you're just I think this needs to be on Jerry Springer or something like that. But so yeah, in the midst of that, when I turned 15, I'll never forget, I came home from school one day, and my mother was in the other room crying, and she was talking to my mother and my grandmother, because we all lived in a 2-bedroom apartment. So it was me, my brother, my stepdad, my mom, and then my aunt and my grandmother, and we lived in a 2-bedroom apartment. My brother and I slept on the floor of the dining room. So the dining room was kind of like my domain. There was no dining room table or whatever. It was just a room that we turned into a bedroom. I had a little mattress on the floor, and I had I know some of you youngins out there aren't going to know anything about this, but I had my boom box with a double cassette recorder, so that way I could time the music on the radio where I could record my favorite. Yeah, I made my own mixtapes, bro. Man, I was gonna be a rapper and a DJ when I was
that's how you used to let someone know that you were interested,
bro.
Give them a mixtape.
I was the king of mixtapes, man. Man, yeah.
Hey, girl, I made you a mix,
bro. Yeah, dude. I was Boys to Men, Shy, Jodeci, all those things, bro.
Jodeci.
Yeah, man. See, some of y'all ain't gonna know nothing about that, but go talk to your grandpa or your dad or whatever. But anyways, but I remember, laying there, man. It was a Friday afternoon, and my mother comes in there, and apparently my stepdad had started drinking again. And she told him, I guess she had given him an ultimatum like a week before that, like, hey, you need to choose us or the alcohol. And she went to pick him up from work that Friday, and he came out to the car. And this is, of course, what my mom's words, but came out to the car and said, he looked her in the eye and just smiled and said, tell the boys I love them, and walked away. And I never saw him again.
To this day.
To this day.
Wow.
And so you're talking about like a 15-year-old young man, you know, who every young man needs affirmation and love from their father. And the one guy I called dad disappeared in an instant, gone. And there have been moments in my life, especially with the arrival of social media, you know, trying to find him and to no avail. And so that sent me into a tailspin as a teenager. Because up to this point, I had experienced every kind of abuse you can imagine in my childhood, where I was sexually abused, physically abused, verbally abused, and now like I felt like I had been emotionally abused, you know, just all of those things. And then to make matters worse, within weeks, my real dad starts calling and wants to build a relationship with me. And so, of course, I'm angry. I'm just a mad kid, you know, and I didn't want anything to do with him. But I saw an opportunity to, like, basically manipulate him to get me whatever I wanted, because I didn't have anything growing up. And so I tell this story all the time. I actually just told this story to our church a few weeks ago. But I remember going to his house one of the first times, or apartment, and he had a huge jar of change. And he's like, if you can roll that change, he's like, you can have whatever's in there. He's like, I don't even know how much is in there. It ended up being like $305 in quarters and pennies and nickels and dimes. Bro, I walked into Foot Locker with $250 of quarters and bought my first pair of Jordans. Like, I was like,
which ones?
Bro, I think they were the, that would have been, dude, I can't remember which Jordans they were. But I just remember, like, I had never owned a nice pair of shoes in my life. And so it's funny, I walk in 8th grade, I'm walking into school, and I still have, like, the just awful other clothes, but I'm sporting like Jordans. So I'm like, I finally have value and worth, was my thought, you know, because, you know, you kind of, at that age, you start realizing, man, your value and your belonging really is like in the clothes you wear, and just, you know, all of those things, the superficial stuff that you begin to believe about yourself. And that carried over into my young adult years, where, like, I grew up with a poverty mindset. You know, where it's just like, if I had money, I was going to spend it on the things that brought me value and worth, you know. So, yeah, within a couple of weeks, I started seeing my dad. Well, then 6 months into it, I come home one evening, and I find that this, y'all, I can't make this stuff up. I find my mom and my biological dad making out.
Are you
in the living
serious?
room. Now, again, every kid's probably like, I wish my parents would, but I'm like, what is happening? Because I only knew one dad, and that was my stepfather, who was a vital part of my growing up. And then here it is, like, I felt like she had just discarded him or forgot about him so quickly.
Yeah.
And I remember I was just livid. I was angry. And my mom and real dad end up getting married, which is wild.
Wow.
While I'm 15. We moved to Murfreesboro. That's how I ended up at Murfreesboro, Oakland.
Gotcha.
But within a year, they were divorced. And after that divorce, it sent my mom into a tailspin. I think she had spent most of her young adult life trying to survive, and she was just exhausted. And she started dabbling in, it started with marijuana, and it started with some of that stuff, and just drinking and pot, and then it turned into pills, you know, meth, things like that. And so she began a drug addiction that for the next 25 years she would battle. And within a year of her divorcing my dad, she was in such bad shape that she ended up, like, taking my checkbook and writing like $3,000 worth of bad checks in my name. Like, and I was 16 years old.
Oh, man.
And so she goes to, like, jail over that for a while. I had to go to court, do all those things. And then within 6 months, she's in prison for 3 years for drugs. So I had to go live with my aunt and uncle, who lived in Westmoreland.
Okay.
And so that's how I ended
That's
up
how
at
you ended up
Westmoreland. And So here I am again. I mean, it was like every year or two, I'm like the new kid in the school, you know, trying to build friends and trying to build life. And
at that point, there's gotta be a thought in your mind of like, why even try to build relationships?
Yeah, exactly.
What's the point?
Well, and just the anxiety of just, you know, trying to fit in and where do I belong, you know, all those things. And so the one thing my aunt did that I'm really grateful for today is that she took us to church. My aunt and uncle, my uncle was actually a deacon at this small little Baptist church in Adolphus, Kentucky, like less than 100 people at this church. And I tell people my aunt had a drug problem. She drug us to church every single week. And but imagine there's like 5 teenage boys, all between like 17 and 14, living in this house.
Wow.
My little brother was 8 at the time, and so this kind of ties into some of the heartbreak and dysfunction too, because she could not take care of 4 teenage boys and an 8-year-old. And so she actually sent my brother to live with his biological father, which really kind of affected mine and his relationship. Because we grew up together, and then all of a sudden now we're being parted. And that actually destroyed my mother, because my aunt signed over custody to his dad. Oh, wow. And so when she gets out of prison, she finds out she doesn't have custody of her son anymore. And it actually sends her back into a worse hole. And so she ends up going to prison for a second stint, and for I think another 3 years. So yeah, I mean, I'm kind of just throwing a lot of details there, but through high school, I hated going to church. Like I was be honest, we were those kids that sat in the back, and we'd be back there either sleeping or making fun of people or just acting up. Like we were hellions. We were awful. I want to apologize to my pastor from back then because it was so bad. And it was funny because my aunt, she was just like she's just all. Have you ever had those like moms or aunts? They're like
pinching
you under the leg, pinching the leg, or whatever. Like she's smiling, but inside she's not smiling. She's ready to kill somebody. Well, she would punish us. She would put us up front. And she'd be like, I was sitting up front today. And I'm like, all you're doing is punishing the pastor. You ain't punishing us. Like, that pastor is like, dude, get them out of here.
I tell people this when they're like, how is it preaching to teenagers? I'm like, teenagers are the most honest audience will ever preach in front. Because if you're boring, their face will let you know, I am bored to death.
Every preacher needs to start by preaching in front of kids and students, because they're brutally honest. And it's like, if you can handle that, then you can handle adults. Yeah. So, but yeah, she did. She took us to church throughout high school. And when I started playing basketball for Westmoreland, I met a guy. His name's David Mitchell, and he became my best friend. And David was a preacher at 16.
Dang.
And so my dude just lived it out. Like, he never really preached at me or like forced it down my throat, but he would invite me to church. He was just the kindest, most genuine person I'd ever met. And so we became like best friends. It's funny because like our senior year, we were like co-MVPs. We both got like all county, like all this stuff. We were like 2 peas in a pod, like really enjoyed hanging out with him. And I always tell people, like, he planted a lot of seeds in my life that led to my faith decision.
Well, just being there.
Yeah, being consistent. Just being there. And I remember at 18, I had just graduated high school, and I think just all of the trauma, everything had kind of culminated in my life to a point of like, I was just soul tired. And I knew that a lot of the choices and decisions I was making in my life at that time, because I remember just thinking like, man, I'm going to be nothing like my dad, nothing like my mom, nothing like my family. But a lot of the decisions I was making was leading me right down that same path. And so, man, God radically got a hold of me. And I want to say it was June 19th of 1996. And it was about a month or so after I graduated high school. A random Sunday, there was no sermon, there was no special music. And actually, I had the flu. And it was the one Sunday I got up running 102 fever that I told my aunt, like, I want to go to church.
Wow.
And I remember she was like even shocked, because my aunt was like, she was hardcore, man. There was no excuse you had that was keeping you home from church, because we worked We would work till like 2 a.m. We all worked at like different restaurants in high school. And I worked at the French restaurant, Shonay's. Some of y'all know about those Shonay's.
A French
That's
restaurant
Shoney's.
in...
That's Shonay's, by the way.
like a French restaurant in Westmoreland?
No,
what
no.
are we talking about?
It was in Gallatin. But, yeah, I always try to, dress it up. I worked at Shonay's. Hitting that breakfast bar, the seafood bar.
And powder eggs. What do you know about
powder
that?
eggs. Yeah. But we would get home like at 2 a.m. So we'd be like, we've been working. She's like, I don't care. You're going to church, And so that was the one morning she was like, hey, you can stay home if you want. Like, I know you're running a fever or whatever. And I'm like, no, I want to go. And I don't even know why I said that. And I promise you, Brendan, like we pulled into that gravel parking lot, dust, cigarette smoke from the deacons on the front porch. And I just walked in the door and walked straight to the altar, and I fell on my face. And man, it felt like I was there for hours. It was probably only like 5 or 10 minutes.
Wow.
But I just remember like just pouring my heart. It was probably like the first time I genuinely talked to God.
Wow.
And just told him like, I want to give you my life. I want to give you everything. And man, it was just like an instant fire in me. I remember going to my pastor and just being like, hey, can I lead a Wednesday night teen Bible study or whatever, which really wasn't a Bible study. It was just me sitting around like just fired up, just telling people my story. And there was 5 teenagers in the entire church, and 4 of them were all from our household. And I remember like I was just excited. I remember telling him I was there every time the doors were open. I was just like, hey, is there something I can do? So he gave me like this title. It was like Sunday school superintendent, which was just a fancy word for like, I get to get up before Sunday school and like read off the devotion out of these books that they gave for Sunday school curriculum.
Yeah.
And he's like, all you got to do is take prayer requests, read the devotion, dismiss to Sunday school. It's like a 10-minute deal. But it would turn into 30 minutes because I would be up there like reading the devotion, and I'd be just like fired up.
Yeah.
And I'd start talking about the devotion, and he's like, man, you might be called to preach. And I'm like, I didn't know what that meant.
Yeah.
And so by the time I was 19, I was like, man, I do think I have a gift. Like I think that God may be calling me to do this. And this is exactly what my pastor said. He looked at me in the face. He said, okay, next Sunday night, you're up.
Whoa.
And I'm like, bro, I don't even like. And so I don't know.
I gave Ross 3 weeks.
3-week notice.
I don't know, but I didn't know the Bible. Like I didn't know anything. I had been reading, but I was still trying to figure out what all this stuff meant. And so I'll never forget, I preached on Jeremiah chapter 1, and it was probably not theologically correct, and it was probably all over the place. But
Did you choose Jeremiah 1?
I did.
Okay.
Yeah. It was one of the few scriptures that stuck out to me. I can't even remember where I'd heard it, but it inspired me to go read it. And I just remember being in awe of God speaking to somebody in the womb. And I just started talking about purpose and, like God having a plan for your life. Like I said, I don't know. It's probably a lot of rambling and shouting and yelling, and full of zeal and very little, content. You know what I mean? But that began my journey. I remember I ended up attending the church that my best friend was at, and that was the first time I was introduced to a student ministry. I had never seen a student ministry in my life. And I was like, this exists? And they had like a rockin' student ministry, and I was like, this is what I want to dedicate my life to. I found the thing that's like, I will give up everything to do this.
Yeah.
And that was my plan. I was going to be a student pastor till I was like 90. I loved pouring into the next generation. I've always had a heart to like try to redeem the youth because of what I grew up in. Like I think my history is what made me want to pour into somebody else's future. And so started doing student ministry, and did student ministry for 15 years. Never had any intentions of pastoring or doing anything like that. And people would even say things like, one day you'll have your own church, blah, blah, blah. And I'd just be like, not me, bro. Like, I ain't doing that. That sounds awful, And but in 2010, I fasted for the first time ever in my life. I never even knew it. I never heard anybody teach on fasting. Somebody sent me a book by Jensen Franklin about fasting. read it. And of course, I'm the guy that's like, when I read something or see something and it fires me up, I'm just like, let's do it. You know, like I don't contemplate it, I just do it. So I'm like, 2 days after I finished the book, all right, I'm doing a 21-day fast. Let's go. And did it. And the Lord just began pulling my heart towards planting a church. And it was really scary. Because at the time I was youth pastoring, not far from here. It was in between Bowling Green and Scottsville. And student ministry was the church was doing great. We were in a very, very comfortable place. It wasn't like we were in a place where it was like, man, things are going bad.
Yeah.
God had his hand all over the ministry. And so that's what made it even more confusing is like, man, why is God calling me out of this? Like, this is the thing that I wanted to do my entire life.
Yeah.
I'm getting to do it. And, so we spent the next year and a half. It took about 6 or 7 months for us to pray through, like, where. And people always saying, like, why Portland? At the time, Portland was an industrial town that in 2008, it took a huge economy hit. When the economy tanked, a lot of factories shut down. There was a lot of poverty in the area, a lot of brokenness. When I started looking at demographics, ton of divorced, broken homes, all kinds of just issues. And a lot of people, it's like, well, that's not where I want to go plant. But for me, it was my story. What I saw in Portland was my story. And so I just believed that God was going to use my story to go and help redeem. I tell people, like, every church has 2 visions. There's a shared vision, which is every single church of Jesus has the same vision, and that is the Great Commission. But then every church has a unique vision. There's a work that God is doing in your corner of the world that he's uniquely gifted you to go be a part of that work. And so for us, it was this idea of Malachi 4, that one day there's going to be a prophet, and his teaching is going to turn the hearts of the fathers back toward their sons and turn the hearts of the sons back toward their fathers. And it's this idea of total healing, restoration, and renewal. And so our unique vision is one of healing and restoration. Because when that prophet came, which would have been John the Baptist and Jesus, ultimately fulfilling that Elijah prophecy, he offered 4 things through the gospel healing, and that was physical healing, emotional healing, relational healing, and spiritual healing. And so that's when you meet people in our church, their stories are going to sound, it's like an echo chamber. You're going to almost hear like, that sounds like that guy's story. That sounds like that guy's story. Because that's the unique vision God has given us. So God trusts us with the abused, the broken, the dysfunctional, the traumatized, the addict, because that's where I came from. And he uniquely gifted me. There's a book called The Wounded Healer. I think it's Henry Nouwen, but that's the point, is like, I have been wounded and healed so that I may go and heal the wounded.
Yeah, man.
Dang.
So, yeah.
What I love about where your story intersects with the story of generation is one of the things our church has been talking about. We're in a vision series, and we've been talking about Nehemiah, and one of the first things we said is vision begins with a God-given burden. So before Nehemiah created any plans to go back to Jerusalem, rebuild a wall, he was first burdened for the city. He wept, and he sat down, and he prayed and fasted and things like that. So it's cool to see that the heartbeat of generation started with a personal burden you had for broken families and broken people.
Absolutely.
And just to see that play out. Which, for context, I also want to remind our church, our listeners who obviously know we're a church plant, hear us talk about church planting a lot. We celebrate when new churches are planted, and we give to that and all different things like that. But you planted a church long before there was all of these different networks to help you figure out, how do you actually do that?
Sure.
And so you and Jessica just kind of figured it out.
When did you plant?
2012. So, I tell people it's interesting because I'm so thankful for my wife. She is the more wiser half of me. Like, I've always been the big dreamer, big faith person. And so I remember when we felt like, man, God may be calling us to this, I started reading books on church planting, because I had no idea what church planting was. I never even heard that term until I told somebody, like, I think God may be leading me to start a church. And they're like, plant a church? I'm like, what do you mean plant a church? I don't know what that means. And so they sent me a couple of books. So I started reading these books. I read 2 books on church planting, and I thought, we can raise $750,000 in a year. That's no problem. Like, I was just thinking, like, okay, we'll launch this church in 6 months. I made a list of 40 names. that if these 40 people will help me start this church, like, we'll just
We're
knock
good.
down the gates of hell, and it's all over.
Yeah.
Like, it's over, bro. Like, Kingdom of God's here. And none of those people helped me start the church.
Dang.
And luckily, I had some wiser people in my life going, hey, let's give this some time. Let's get you guys sent to some boot camp stuff. Let's get you guys sent to an assessment, all these things. I was like, okay, like, whatever. Like, I mean, we can do it, And then we went through assessment, and I was like, you know what? We need to wait. We need to take some time. And so we spent about a year and a half. We started with, I think the third family that I asked to join us finally said yes. And it took them like 3 months to say yes. And so I was like, man, is anybody going to help us start this church? And so I'll never forget, our first meeting was in our living room, and it was like 8 people. And I drew on a board, I wrote the name Jesus, circled it, and I just said, hey, everybody give me characteristics of Jesus, And so we started writing that stuff out, and I was like, this is what the church is going to look like, And so, yeah, we spent about a year and a half. We built a team of about 85 to 90 people. And 6 months before we planted, we had a prayer service, and I just had everybody close their eyes because we knew what school we were going to launch out of in Portland. And I said, I just want you to imagine day one. I said, for some reason, I just believe 400 people are going to show up, and we're going to see cars all along the sidewalk. We're going to see families walking hand in hand, walk to the door of a school to come experience Jesus. And so March 4th, 2012 rolls around. I remember I was in the hallway that was kind of next to where the entrance of the school was, and I was just spending some time praying, kind of off to myself. And I just kept hearing cheering, because we had kind of had a thing back then for First Impression that, like, when we had VIPs pull up, the team would cheer. And so it was just like nonstop. And I'm like, what is going on? And so I go to the end of the hallway, and I look out the door, and I kid you not, Brendan, it was like everything we imagined was happening. Like, cars were parked in the grass, cars were parked on the sidewalk. I'm watching these families roll up. Because, I mean, when you go into launch day, I mean, you know the feeling of like, all right, this is it.
Yeah.
Is anybody going to show
Please, God,
up?
and let someone show up.
Yeah, anybody. And we had so much faith that we knew our auditorium was smaller than the number of people that we believed were coming. And so we set up an overflow in the hallway. And so we had a TV, a little janky. It was probably a 36-inch TV or whatever plugged in. It was like a delay. So, I mean, it was a delay. I mean, you're talking about, like, just on the other side of the wall is the auditorium, but it's a delay.
Can hear
from there
you,
to
but
here.
it's not lining up.
Yeah. And there were 482 people.
Wow.
And there were people sitting on the floor and standing along the wall in the auditorium. And then we had like 45 people in that overflow.
Golly, man.
Kids ministry in the cafeteria. We actually divided up classrooms with construction plastic, the orange plastic.
Oh,
construction.
yeah.
That's how we built classrooms.
Wow, dude.
Yeah, dude. I'm like, how are people dropping their kids off here? It's just so sketch,
Man, I get them back.
Yeah. But we're reaching broken families, right?
Yeah.
So it's whatever. But man, and I mean, obviously there's a ton of stuff between there and today that's happened, but God has been faithful, and there's a lot in that journey that has impacted my life and changed my ministry. And I'm sure you'll probably ask some questions that lead to that. But
Yeah, man.
so March 4th, 2012 is when we got started.
Yeah, we prayed for the same thing. I remember standing in front of our team for pre-launch gatherings, and I said the same thing, just praying and believing for 400 people. We had 287 show up to the glory of God. Come on now.
Yeah, that's still amazing, though. Like, when you think about that, like, anyone that can have the kind of faith, because I think a lot of times it's not that we struggle with faith that moves God, it's we struggle with faith that moves us.
Yeah.
But even moving yourself to a place of believing immeasurably more than what you even think or imagine.
Yeah.
Like, God's always going to do his thing, but I think anytime you have big faith, those things, God blesses that for sure.
Well, and I think you'd agree with this too. I think what you've been doing, how long ago is that now? Y'all are in your
14 years. It'll be 14 years in March.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you've learned this lesson 1,000 times over compared to me. I think what I'm learning is God God doesn't give you something that you don't have the ability to steward.
Mm-hmm.
And the more I think about kind of the journey of our church, I'm like, Lord, I prayed for 400 people on launch Sunday, and if you brought 450, I severely lacked the leadership ability to properly care for 450 people. We didn't have the right systems. We didn't have the right team. We were so focused on getting to that day, which I think every church planner is. Like, I just need to make Sunday happen. But if, he had brought 450 people, there's 200 of them, we probably wouldn't. I don't know if we would have been able to call them and say, just because.
Well, and I think that is true. I also think the opposite is true sometimes, because I think our story is one of like, sometimes God will allow you to have more than you can handle or steward just to break your pride. Because, there is a temptation when you get into that realm, because the reason why when we planted, it was such a weird time was really the rise of social media. People forget, like, Twitter had only been on the scene for like a year and a half. I think Instagram, I don't know if Instagram had came out yet, but it was like either super early or hadn't come out yet.
Yeah, that would have been super early, if anything.
And then Facebook had just really, in the last year and a half before that,
that's a
transitioned from college only to like everybody.
That's right.
And so here was the problem, is like that was the rise too of all of these church conferences. So you have the rise of all these church growth conferences and the rise of social media. It was a recipe. It was a perfect recipe for disaster, because what came on the scene were a ton of people who had influence and social media savvy, or this idea. It was a very narcissistic time to get into church planting. And that's why I think we are now living in the age of the moral failures of pastors, because you had people who were really good influencers and podcasters, but terrible pastors. And so the temptation you fell into was like, how many followers do I got? Are we taking a picture of this stuff and posting it? Are we celebrating that? So now you're looking at all of the megas and the stuff they're doing with social media, and you're trying to like copy that and portray that. And so the problem is now everything you're doing is born really out of a selfish, narcissistic point of view and not Spirit of God. Even though you slap a label of God's moving, God's doing this stuff, but really there's a selfish drive to measure your success by the 4 B's: butts, budgets, buildings, and buzz. And so, and that's what kind of launched that season of ministry for a lot of people. And we are now living in the aftermath of that, because you're starting to see those things begin to crumble, and you're starting to see those leaders begin to crumble. There have been very few leaders survive it, or they've either changed and walk through their own discipleship journey and transformation and have healed from that and have repented of that, or they've experienced moral failure, or they've experienced some sort of implosion in their church. And so that's kind of what we're living in right now. And I'm so gracious to God that He broke me before He broke our church.
Talk about that.
Yeah. So we fell into that trap. I read every leadership book known to man, watched every podcast, went to every we were conference freaks, it's like, that's all right, let's look at the next year. When's that conference coming up? Let's go. We're taking our team, we're doing the stuff, we're dreaming afterward. And
for people that don't understand church conferences, like why do you go to a church conference? What is kind of what are you picking up? What are you learning? Why do you go?
Oh man, you want to know how to grow your church.
Okay.
You want to know how to be one of these elite leaders. You want to know how to build the best staff. You want to know how to run a staff. That's the thing. I didn't know how to run a staff. My staff were volunteer people who helped run a student ministry, not an entire church. We believed after year 1 that we would be a church of 250, and we were a church of 500. Wow. And we could not sustain that.
In Portland, Tennessee, everybody.
And we couldn't sustain it. I had a volunteer running our church finances. Like, I look back and I'm like, how in the world did we survive infancy?
Yeah.
It was rough when I look back. So we're doing all the things, and that was my goal. I wanted to be the best leader. I wanted to, I mean, because people start feeding that too. Like, man, you're the largest launch of our network ever. You know, they start feeding that stuff. Well, now that you're being fed that, that's what you live off of. Well, now I've got to keep that reputation. Like, if our church goes into decline, what then? If our church doesn't grow this next year, what then? And so that's the worry and the fear is like, now you have to live up to an expectation of yourself and of your performance that you didn't even have before, but you have it now because everybody else is expecting it. And you watch all these other people on social media too. That was the rise of Furtick. That was we launched at an area where it really was the launching of the celebrity, quote unquote, pastor. And so that's what you were trying to like compare yourself to and live up to. And so what I realized, man, I was a great leader, a terrible disciple of Jesus. And I had lived, and I didn't even realize this. By the time I'm like 30, and I had lived I got saved at 18, but I did not get healed. And there's a difference.
Yeah, talk about that.
There's a difference between salvation and deliverance. I mean, you look at the Exodus story.
Yep.
It took 40 years to heal some of those people, and some of them never found it. They never left their wilderness. They were delivered out of Egypt, but they never got delivered from Egypt out of them. And so for all these years, all of my ministry, my marriage, my relationships were all driven from an unhealthy place of, I need validation, I need love, I've been abandoned all my life. Every pastor, every leader that I had, I ended up damaging some of those relationships because I had unspoken expectations of them, which, by the way, just FYI for everybody out there, that is usually the root issue of almost any relationship or marriage, is that usually there are unspoken, unmet expectations from the other person. I expected these men to be my dad. That's what I was really looking for.
Yeah.
Where's my dad in this? Every man needs to be told, I'm proud of you, I love you, you got what it takes. I never had that.
Wow.
And so I'm living in my marriage and in my ministry looking for those three things to be. And so when you're growing a church, or when the church is growing and you hear that, you got what it takes. You got what it takes. The problem is I didn't believe I was loved. And the only reason why I thought I was loved is because I got what it takes. And so, and God has a unique way of breaking us. And so I never healed for myself. My wife didn't even know a lot of details from my childhood. She knew about my past, but didn't know like hardcore details. Because we all think we can outrun our past until our past comes knocking. And it was about 3 or 4 years in. We went through a period of 2015 through 2017 was nothing but hell on earth for me and my family. We walked through trial after trial after trial. My wife walked through a ton of stuff with her family. I walked through a ton of stuff with my family. I mean, like, I don't have time to unpack all of it, but maybe we can spend time talking about those things another day. But I mean, I'm talking about like deep trauma type wounds, trying to get healed from. And then my son was born in 2015. And I had just began to really restore and try to rebuild a relationship with my biological father. Because, now I got kids. He wants to be in their life. Because we just kind of had this up and down roller coaster since meeting him in 2015. And he actually had just gotten saved. And so I look back and like my dad was actually finding healing faster than I was, because he was trying to like really renew and restore things between us. But I was still in my like hardness of heart phase. And I'm like, well, maybe the kids do need to get to know their grandfather, but like, I'm cool. We don't have to be daddy's son. Yeah. So my son gets born, and then the Sunday before, he's born in February, and my dad, he was born during a snowstorm. It was like 8 inches of snow that night. It was wild. So my dad never got to come see him. The Sunday before Father's Day, I get a phone call that morning. I get up that morning to get ready to pray and get ready for church. And I had a voicemail from my dad's sister saying he had died of a heart attack.
Oh, wow.
And even though we were still in the midst of restoring that relationship, there's something happens to a man when his dad dies, regardless of whether that relationship is healthy or not. Especially if it's not healthy, you begin to go on this journey of trying to like, I never got these things taken care of or fulfilled. So long story short, walking through all this stuff, I think it's that next year, still walking through things with my wife's family. We go up to church on a random Sunday. We walk up to the front of the school, and there's a volunteer setting up some parking things, and I just stopped to talk to him. And within 5 minutes, I realized that the man that I'm talking to, who's a volunteer on our parking team, was one of the men who sexually abused me when I was 10 years old. And he's in our church. And it sent me on this like mental tailspin for the next 2 months. And I didn't tell anybody. I would be terrified to pull up. Like every Sunday was nothing but anxiety. And I would sneak in the back of the church and sneak out. And people just thought I didn't want to be around people, but the reality was I didn't want to see this man. And so I would begin, I had dreams, nightmares every single night that my son, something terrible happened to him. I was dreaming that he got kidnapped, died, all these different things. I would begin to daydream of other jobs I could take. Like, how do I get out of pastoring this church? And I was starting to try to formulate plans of how to hand the church off to somebody. I was even like making up spiritual things like, maybe we could combine, what if we did something radical in our area and we just combined a couple of churches and made one church? But really what I was doing was like, I don't want to pastor. Like I just want to get rid of this.
Yeah.
And
is Jessica aware that all
she's
this
not.
is? Oh, wow.
She's not until about 2 months in. And then finally one day, man, I just broke. Like I knew that if I don't talk to somebody, like I'm not in a mentally good place. Yeah. And so I remember we were getting ready and I could not look her in the face. And so I got in the shower, she's at the sink. I said, hey, I got to tell you something. And then I just lose it. Like I can't even talk because I'm just like hyperventilating, like weeping. And of course she's like, what is going on? Like, she's assuming the worst. And so I just began to slow walk my story and tell her every detail of my childhood. And of course, the enemy wants you to believe that the moment I share this shameful thing, I'm going to be looked at with disgust. I'm going to be a disappointment. I'm going to be shamed again. And of course, it's the one thing that actually drew us closer together. She loved me so well during that time. And it began this slow walk process of sharing it with other pastors, sharing it with elders. And they paid for my counseling. And so I went on about 1.5 to 2 year wholeness and health journey. I took my first ever solitude sabbatical that fall, and that changed my life. This is my 11th year that I've done it in a row.
Wow.
Done a solitude sabbatical. I take a silence retreat about once a year. I do several retreats throughout the year that have become a part of my formation. But that's when I discovered authors like John Ortberg, Dallas Willard, Comer. C.S. Lewis. Like I was reading all of the new leadership stuff, but I wasn't reading like books from saints who had deep, deep wells of a spiritual life. Yeah. And that's when I discovered spiritual formation. I discovered discipleship for the first time. Nobody had ever our form of the gospel in the South had become like, hey, do you know where you're going to go if you die tonight? Instead of like, hey, if you wake up in the morning, how are you going to live? And so the gospel just became something so much bigger and sweeter to me other than just like, where are you going to go when you die? And so I went on a 1.5, 2 year journey of just like, man, I'm just running hard after prayer and spiritual formation and just asking God to continue to shape me into this image and strip away all of this need for the ministry. And then about 2019, right when COVID hit, was when like I was done with the seeker-sensitive model of church. I was done with just attractional based. So coming out of COVID, I remember meeting with our team and saying, guys, hey, our focus is going to be spiritual formation and discipleship. And we may actually decline. But I told God, like, if this church gets stripped down to 10 people, I don't care. My identity is not in this anymore. And lo and behold, we grew. Like, it turns out people are actually hungry for an authentic form of spirituality. And our whole mantra had been like, if you grow God's people, God will grow his church. And so that's been my focus for the last 4 or 5 years from our church. I tell people, like, we're living in the fruit of the work that I did in the soil of my heart 7 years ago. It's taken that long for that fruit to come to harvest, and it's really just starting to bud.
Yeah.
And so I'm starting to reap the spiritual life of the seeds that were sown in 2016 and 17 just now.
Yeah.
And so now, like, man, I try to live life at a pace that's not just overly busy or hurried. And I do prioritize. I love what Dallas Willard says. He says the greatest gift we can offer God and other people is our transformed self.
Wow.
Not our church buildings or our ministries. I think we forget the kingdom of God is never at risk. And I think when you're a church planner, people make you believe like you are responsible for making sure the kingdom of God doesn't fail in Bowling Green. You are responsible that the kingdom of God doesn't fail in Portland. And that's just a lie. God grows his church. We do not.
Yeah.
And the quicker we get that through our heads, then the quicker we release ourselves from the responsibility of doing God's work when we need to do our work.
Yeah. I love how it's every step of the journey, you can see what God's doing in your heart has gone downstream into the life of your church, your family. So what began with this burden for broken people, church reached broken, hurting people. And then when God starts to do something new in you, that goes downstream into your church. And now your church is getting stronger spiritually. Like you said, y'all grew. I mean, I know y'all are either in the process of or currently expanding.
We're hopefully about a year or so away from breaking ground. But yeah, we're in all the preliminary parts of that right now, trying to build another auditorium. So,
that's unbelievable. Well, one of the things that you kind of touched on that I want you to like get really practical and help people listening is you've done a lot of the heavy lifting over years and wrestled with God to figure out, okay, how do I not lose what God's trying to do in my heart? How do I cultivate a healthy soul? How do I focus more on what God's doing in me instead of, what I'm doing around me, different things like that. How would you encourage or lead people that are listening about how to focus on spiritual formation for themselves, things like that?
It's interesting because I get that question sometimes, and I think there's a 2-part answer. One, if it's a question that's being asked from pastors, it's hard to explain. I think what a lot of pastors are looking for is a program. Like, well, tell me the 3 things you would do. And the problem is like, programs are great for systems, but they're not great for the soul. And so, like, if you don't get to a place, you talk about doing the heavy lifting, people are like, well, how do I heavy lift? Well, you get crushed. And so until you get crushed by a weight you cannot bear, you don't know what it's like to lift heavy weight. And so what they're really saying is, well, now that you've lifted heavy weight, come spot me while I lift mine. Yeah. And I can't do that. Yeah. This has to be an overbearing conviction of you. Just like I tell people, I don't practice what I preach what I practice. Every sermon, every teaching that I do are things that you talk about downstream. It's downstream from what God is already doing in my heart and my life. And so I tell people there's no that the first step is get absolutely crushed and convicted about your own spiritual formation. When that happens, then God has your attention and he has your heart. And then you can be open to whatever it is he wants you to do. But I do tell people, start small. Evaluate, what is your prayer life? What is your ability to sit still in the presence of God? I honestly think the number one thing that people struggle with today is sitting still. If you can't be still more than 10 minutes without just being like, I feel unproductive. I feel like I'm wasting time. I'm being lazy. Willard said something one time that wrecked me. He said, only lazy people are too busy. And he said, because you're not willing to do the hard work of getting control of your own schedule before you allow the demands of other people to crush you.
My God.
And so it's just that idea of where's the margin in my life that I can just be in the presence of God? And so what I began to do was evaluate my priorities in the lens of looking at my roles that I play in life. Because here's what people will say: put God first. Okay, well, does your checkbook and your calendar reflect that? Because most people that say they put God first, if you looked at how they spent their everyday schedule, it's not true. And so if that is my primary role in life as a follower of Jesus, the first thing I put on my calendar is my constant abiding in him. So it's, where does my prayer, my Bible time go? Where does my silent time go? Do I have midday prayer? Do I have examine prayer? Do I have like these things that are these rhythms, what's called a rule of life? Do I have a rule of life that does not get impeded by the demands of life?
Yeah.
Because what we call the demands of life is really just culture trying to suck you into the whirlwind of what they expect you to do. This productivity, this mindset of productivity and produce, instead of like realizing the greatest gift that I can offer anybody is my transformed self. And so if I don't do anything today, but who I'm becoming blesses somebody, or helps them see the Holy Spirit at work in their life,
That's productive.
that is productive.
Wow.
And then my second role is a husband. So then I prioritize, how am I spending time with my wife? You know, we talk about spending side-by-side time, face-to-face time, back-to-back time. You know, it's like there are times when we're back-to-back, we're both attacking the world and attacking the day. There's side-by-side, man, we're actually doing things together. And then there's face-to-face where it's like this is our time of intimacy and conversation and one-on-one time. I have to prioritize that. And then my third role is a dad. You know, and then I prioritize one-on-one time with each of my kids and pour into them. And, you know, I've coached their sports. I've done other things to make sure that they are a priority to me. And then you get to like 4 or 5, and then it's like pastor, you know. And if we're honest, most of us, our roles will always communicate our priorities, not what you say they are. And so for most people, their job, their career, their whatever, that's usually where whatever your number 1 or number 2 is, that's where you find your identity. And usually the consumption of our time is because this is where I find my identity. It's possessions, it's wealth, it's success, it's all those things. And we actually teach our kids the same thing. I mean, in our area, you probably see this in Bowling Green, but man, travel sports or sports, it's the thing that we communicate to our kids. This is where you have value. And you know, I went to school with people who are in their 40s, and it's like all they talk about are the good old days. And I'm just like, you know, you were a successful football player for a small town school
in '94.
Get over it. You know, like, you know, you've went through 3 marriages now, and your kids don't talk to you. But man, you were a really good running back. You know, and it's just like, what are we doing? And like, it's funny that people that do, like, I enjoyed high school, but I look back and go, man, those are the worst years of my life, you know, for me personally. Like, a lot of cool things happen, whatever, but I look at the life that God's been able to give me now, and it's like, dude, this pales in comparison. I was just having this conversation with my daughter last night. You know, she's really just struggling through, like, calling and things like that. She's so worried about getting it wrong. And I just told her, I was like, God does not care 1 ounce about what you do, but who you become. Because when you become the kind of person that can hear the voice of God and be in his presence, he'll guide you to what you need to do.
Absolutely.
And, you know, just trying to get her to see, like, man, some of these things, they pale in comparison, you know, and she's got a serious relationship right now. And I just told her, I was like, society will tell you nothing is worth leaving an opportunity for success, including marriage. I said, baby, if God sends you a man that's worth giving your life to and building a life with, I told her, I was like, I was willing to drop everything, drop out of school, do everything to marry your mama. I said, and it led to some of the most beautiful gifts in my life. We live in a culture in a day that just demonizes marriage and demonizes family and puts success over that. And then when you get married, you think marriage is the attachment to your success instead of the thing that actually makes you successful. If I'm a good husband and a good father, man, because I love, I think it was Comer when he talked about, oh my gosh, it's Monday morning. I wish I could remember the name. Luis Palau. Does that sound familiar? He was, I think he's from South America, but they said that he ministered probably to more people in Latin America than Billy Graham ever did.
Oh, wow.
Like, he's kind of like the Latin American version of Billy Graham. Huge evangelist. They said at his funeral, His kids got up there, his grandkids, family. Not one of them mentioned his ministry. All they talked about was, man, Grandpa, we go on vacation. He spent every day of vacation with a different grandkid for breakfast. And he said one of the most touching moments was when his gay granddaughter got up and said, my grandfather never treated me differently or treated me harshly or judged me. He said, she's like, I'm in process of trying to figure out like my own walk and my own faith, but he just loved me.
Wow.
That's what he was remembered for, not all the people he preached to. And I think about going to Billy Graham's. Have you ever been to Billy Graham's museum?
I haven't. I want to.
Oh, you got to go. It's so good. The thing that moved me the most was you go outside and you go to where they're buried. And they're actually buried next to his worship leader and his wife, because they did ministry together for decades.
I did not know that.
And they were just like best friends. And I'm like, could you imagine having such deep relationships that you get buried next to each other?
Yeah.
And just like, man, to me, that would be the ultimate flex in life. Because how many people are like, you're buried next to random people, and maybe people will give you all these accolades, but you're not really, you don't experience life and death with real deep relationships. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so that's what I'm in search for, man, are those kind of relationships that are just so deep and life-giving. And, man, we get to do ministry, and that's fun, and it's awesome, and I love it, but really just waking up and getting to be a husband and a dad and getting to, like, be with people, do stuff like this, like, this is so life-giving to me,
Yeah.
you know?
One of the things that makes me, I feel burdened for is, on Sundays, I'll see families come in, and I usually try to grab the dad and just, it's a touch point. It's 30 seconds, a minute. How are you doing? And there's almost like this resounding feeling of exhaustion, tired, busyness, and I wish I always had the best advice. I'm sure my advice sounds helpful sometimes. Sometimes I probably get more distracted than I need to be, but I do feel like there's something in the culture, especially around family, where it is the sports, it's the PTOs, it's the everything, and then the family time, let alone the spiritual discipline things as a family. It's like, well, we really just need to sleep.
Yeah. Well, people think that that life change or transformation or whatever happens by addition, but it actually happens by subtraction. So here's the problem. Like, we're having this conversation about spiritual disciplines and prayer. The first thought some of our listeners will have is, well, how do I add that into my life?
Yeah.
And the problem is not that you need to add it. The problem is you probably have some things in your life you need to subtract.
Say that, dude.
It's just when you subtract it and replace it, then that time gets redeemed.
Yeah.
And it gets redeemed with time with the Lord. When I began changing the way I did things, especially for Sundays, it was like I get up at 3:45 because I want to make sure I spend an ample amount of time in prayer for the ministry that's about to be done that day. But for me to do that requires me to go to bed between 8 and 8:30 on a Saturday night. The problem is most of our listeners will hear that and go, oh no, FOMO. I'm going to miss out on Saturday night, blah, blah, blah. What about games? What about football? What about listen, I'm a huge Vols fan, and there have been plenty of Saturday nights that I've went to bed going, Lord, it's in your hands. Like, I have to. And I just want you to know that's difficult.
Yeah.
But for me, it's like I had to get to a place where I had to get serious about, like, am I serious about this, or is this just something I'm trying to add to my life? Because if I'm just trying to add it to my life, whatever I see as the burden will get cast off first. That's why people stop serving first. They stop going to church first, because really they've tried to add Jesus and church into their life instead of, God, you have replaced all of the things that I thought were valuable in my life. And so that's why those things get cast off first, because reality is those are the burdensome things. And Jesus said, man, my yoke is easy, my burden is light.
Yeah.
So if Jesus and church and serving and giving, all those things are a burden to you, you're not carrying the yoke of Jesus, you're carrying the yoke of performance and religion. So
Clip that. Clip that.
Get up and leave on that. You know Pastor Devin Webb, right? In Connect,
so.
in Mount Juliet Connect Church.
I think I've heard of him, but I haven't met him.
Okay.
Yeah.
He's not old enough to be my dad. I make him mad. I always tell him he's like my spiritual father, but he's like, I'm not that old, dude. But one of the things we were processing is he's like, what are you learning in this season, kind of moving into year 2 as a church? I said, man, I'm just learning that, I have to get better at saying no to things I like, because as the demands increase, so discipline needs to increase, and so there's some things that I enjoy doing in my life that I need to just realize I don't get to say yes to that anymore.
Right.
And so one of the things that he said was, and I think this is not just being a pastor, I think it's being anything, a mom, a dad, leader, whatever, is you start by saying no to the things that aren't productive. You move into saying no to the things that you like. And then the last step is learning the discipline to say no to the things that you love.
Yeah.
And then it's only then that God knows that he has your heart.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I was like, man, there's a lot of things I love right now.
Yeah.
Like, I would love to stay up till 11
Yeah.
and watch that fourth quarter.
Right.
I would love to, be able to be a part of the conversation of some of the new shows that come out. But if I do that, that means I wake up at 7 a.m.
Yeah.
and my kids are already up. Then I got to go. And then before I know it, it's Monday and I've spent no time with the Lord.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think that's just helpful, dude.
Well, and that's what I'm trying to teach like young men too, like in their 20s, because most of our 20s. There's a book. It's called The Holy Longing, and then by Rolheiser, and then he has another book right after that. They go together, but he talks about our spiritual journey. And our 20s are normally lived by our passions. Like you're running at a breakneck speed, you're living off 3 hours sleep, you're whatever, and really you're just driven by whatever desires at play. That's why some of them they're playing in the strip clubs, or they're going to clubbing, or they're spending all the time partying, or they're womanize, all this stuff, because they're led by their desires. But if you can harness those desires and say, God, how do these desires lead me toward you? It's different. I forget was it Thomas Aquinas? It's the famous quote where he's like, Lord, take away this lust from me, just not right now. Because
I haven't heard that,
there's
but
a reality. Like
yeah.
he was brutally honest. Like, I don't want this, but honestly, man, that's all I want right now. And so later on he would give his heart and life to Christ and live a life of purity. But like that's our 20s. In our 30s, it's like it's the first time you really realize your brevity of life. So then you start really thinking about, like, man, do I have the job I really want? Am I in the relationship I really want? And then you get to your 40s, and this is why when you don't take control of your passions in your 20s and you don't have any sense of direction in your 30s, by your 40s, what people are looking for, it's not a midlife crisis. It's the result of your lack of emotional maturity. And so what you end up doing is looking for your second honeymoon. And so you realize life is halfway over. I need to start over. And so if you don't have the emotional maturity to realize, like, God has gifted me with purpose, and so how do I live from my 30s to my 60s giving my life away to others, that my work, my influence, everything I have is actually for the betterment of serving people. And then when you get through your 60s, through your 80s, or however long the Lord lets you live, now you begin thinking, how do I actually give my death away?
Yeah.
How does my death actually impact and make people's lives better and not worse?
Yeah.
That when I die, I'm not leaving my kids and grandkids with a trauma bill of having to go to counseling and deal with all those things because we didn't get it done before I left the earth.
It's interesting. I have a group on Wednesdays of men. We meet at 6 a.m. And it's a pretty wide range of ages from, 30 to 65. And it's so interesting to me. We'll be talking about an issue or something that's common in men. And the guys that are north of 45, their approach is always one that's so much less anxious, so much less self-centered, and so much more focused on legacy, focused on what are they doing with their life that makes a difference, and less just keeping up with the Joneses or whatever. So there's a reason somebody walks in our church with gray hair. I'm like, please don't leave.
Yeah, absolutely.
We need you.
Absolutely, bro.
So,
and pray for that. We prayed for that for years. A lot of people were afraid to come to our church if they had gray hair because they thought this church is just for young people. But as we started getting more sages, it attracted more sages. And we literally prayed, like, God, send us sages. I need people who are way more experienced and smarter and wiser and more spiritual than me.
Yeah.
And God answered that and honored that prayer. But I had to sincerely seek that.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, dude, we could talk for 3 hours.
Yeah, man.
I just checked. We're already at like an hour and a half, but
I love
feels
it.
like it's been 10 minutes.
Yeah, it really does.
Do part 1, part 2, part 3.
Yeah, we need
do
to-
a whole
keep coming
series.
back.
We need to do a multiple part. Really quickly, for people that are like, man, I really like what Pastor Brandon had to say. Where did he learn that? Where is he what's kind of the stream of information that you learn? What are like maybe 2 or 3 books that you would recommend right now?
Gosh, man, it's going to be so hard, Brendan, because I love
I know.
books. I love so many books. The Life I've Always Wanted by John Ortberg. That's always a top read for me. Renovation of the Heart by Dallas Willard. Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl.
That's
I highly
a mighty
encourage
one.
everybody to read that one. He survived Auschwitz concentration camp.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
He became a therapist afterward, but he talks about how people, how different people respond to trauma. The Hiding Place by Corrie ten Boom. It's another fun fact: when you turn 40, you become a World War II nut. So just prepare for that. You know, so you're just like, I want to study World War II. That's when you know it's finally arrived. You're getting old. Those 4 for sure. I think I love any kind of work that's centered around the soul. Soul Keeping by John Ortberg. Oh my gosh, such a beautiful book. But yeah, I think those are 4 or 5 top books that I would
Try to link those.
recommend.
Yeah, we'll put them
for
in
sure.
the description. And you created a model in your church around practicing the way too, didn't you?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
So Comer, John
Yep.
Mark Comer.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, other than that, where can people listen to more of you, find you? You have a podcast, right?
I do. I have 2 podcasts.
Yeah.
We're getting ready to crank the other one back up next year. I've actually taken time off to write a book, so I'm close
I was
to
getting ready to ask you if you had a book.
Really?
Yeah, man. Like I'm almost done with the editing process, and so
Okay.
that's been heavy. But yeah, and then basically the book is my story, and so
I'm gonna read that.
look early
Yeah, dude.
2026 for
Okay.
release date. But
Have you released anything, title or anything like that yet?
Not yet. Not
Okay.
yet.
All right.
So I want to make sure I get done with the edits before I tell
Stay
you anything.
tuned.
That's so stay tuned. But
That's exciting.
I've already started working with a design team and all that kind of stuff. So, but yeah, it's funny you ask that because like I tell people all the time, my goal one day is to be that guy. Like, you know, I don't know if there's any Star Wars freaks out there, but it's like, you know, somebody told me of this guy. He's pretty wise, but he's up in the hills somewhere. You gotta go find him. Like I don't even know where he's at. I don't know how to get in touch with him, but here's a map. You know, a secret map. And I'm on social media like maybe once a week. So I mean, you can follow me on Instagram. I think it's bpettygc. I'm on Facebook, but again, I don't do Facebook Messenger. If you want to actually contact me, email would be the best way to do that. That's pastorbgc@gmail.com. Our website is generationchurch.me. Yeah, I mean, I'm on Twitter, but I'm an old head like that, and I usually get on Twitter just to look at sports stuff or news.
It's
But,
called X, bro.
yeah, see, that's what I'm telling you. See, I'm an old head. So yeah, I'm not super engaged. I probably won't engage with you on social media, but you can find content and stuff there. But,
Yeah.
you know, yeah. that's
In
pretty much
a
it.
lot of kind of what you've talked about today, I know from a church, y'all done series around some of these things too.
Absolutely. Yeah. Like I said, whatever is going through me is going to end up flowing through our church.
Generation Church, Portland, Tennessee. Find them on YouTube.
Yeah, you can find our sermons on YouTube or, like I said, on our website, generationchurch.me. Our discipleship pathways on there too. So maybe if you are out there and you're like, hey, where's some areas I can start building a rule of life? We actually have a rule of life builder on our website. We have a ton of resources just to like help you get you started. You don't have to attend our church to like tap into those resources. So,
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Well, dude, thanks for being with us today.
Oh,
Great.
man,
Means
had
the
a
world.
blast.
Will you do us a favor and close the podcast out by praying?
Absolutely. Let's do it. Father, we just we revel in your glory and just how good you are. It's amazing how you can walk out one day in a t-shirt and the next day bundled up in a coat and a hoodie. I think it's just a reminder that you are in control of our seasons. You are in control of creation. And God, when we try to take control or take the reins, it doesn't work out well. But when we trust that there is a reason for the season we are in, God, it helps develop in us faith and trust and to just enjoy whatever it is. So, Lord, maybe there are people hearing or listening to this, God, that they are in a season where they expect it to be warm, but God, maybe it's bitterly cold in their life. Maybe they're walking through grief. Maybe they're walking through their own trauma. They're walking through their own healing, forgiveness, bitterness, whatever it may be. I pray, Lord, that they would learn to find you in the midst of their grief, find you in the midst of their hurting, find you in the midst of their inability to forgive. And may we be reminded that, according to John 15, that we do not base our relationship with you based off of how we feel toward you, but it's how you feel toward us. Mm-hmm. And so, God, when our emotions and our circumstances tell us otherwise, may we cling to the word, not what the world says we should feel. Because, God, you are faithful. You tell us in Exodus 34, 6 and 7, God, that you are a God who is slow to get angry, full of mercy and compassion and unfailing love. You are for us, not against us. And God, you long to forgive. You long to show grace. You long to show mercy. May we seek that today. May we rest in your love and rest from all of our performance. And we pray and ask this in Jesus' name. Amen.